Hello, you're welcome to LCG Academy graphics tutorial, and we're going to be teaching you the principles of graphics design. So, what are the principles of graphic design? These are the key rules that govern how we organize or arrange the various elements that we have in our design. Now, it describes the how of a graphic design, while elements of graphic design describes words. Now, for the principles of graphic design, we have emphasis, contrast, hierarchy, repetition, balance, proximity, alignment, and white space. So these particular principles, we'll discuss them in this tutorial. Emphasis in design helps to bring attention to a part of your visual composition, and this could be a shape, an object, or an area that you deem to be important in your design. And there are things that can use to establish emphasis, such as contrast, proportion, white space, and repetition. Now look at this design, for example. Just spend a few seconds looking at it. Now, there are certain parts of this design that your eyes will go to first. For example, you're likely to see this early enough, and this is because of the contrast between this and the background and the empty space around it that's kind of sets it apart together with the how bold and the size of the image. Now, this text too, you're likely to see it very early because of the size compared to this text here. So the size helps to give you the emphasis on this particular text, the dead space around, all of these things helps to give the sense of emphasis for this particular object in this design. Look at the one on the right side, you can see this particular text no more is very bold and has bright color. This red color is a bright color, so this gives emphasis. You're most likely going to see this before you think about reading any other thing in this particular design. So by using size and color, you'll be able to establish emphasis to this particular text here. The same thing here, the size, cracking, and the dead space around it gives emphasis to this particular text. You're likely to see this before you see any other part in this design composition. So you can use that for emphasis. Now, hierarchy is when you arrange elements to show the order of their importance. People that see your design are most likely to check out the most dominant feature first before moving down to the less dominant one, and then on till they finish seeing all the elements of the design. Now, it's very important because sometimes people have very little time to check out your design, so you want to ensure that the most important elements are made dominant in your design so they can see it first and be convinced by your design, even if they are checking it within a very short period of time. Now, you use hierarchy to add structure, you create visual organization, you create direction, add emphasis, and help people navigate through your design using hierarchy. Now, things that can help you to establish hierarchy in your design include size. People are more likely to notice the larger element before they notice the smaller element. So by using size, you can establish hierarchy. Colors can be used to establish hierarchy. Bright colors are more attractive compared to muted colors. You can use contrast to establish hierarchy. Alignment, elements that are out of alignment, they tend to stand out more than the ones that are too aligned. Repetition can also be used to establish hierarchy. By repeating certain objects or styles, you can give a sense of importance to those particular objects. Proximity, white space, like we mentioned, they can also be used to establish hierarchy. People tend to be drawn to elements that have lots of space around them. So it's more as if you're focusing on those particular elements. So texture and style can also be used to establish hierarchy. Now, take a few seconds to look at this image. You're most likely to go from this particular one to this before you think about this. And you've used various things to establish hierarchy here. The size, the color have been used to provide you some sense of hierarchy in this design. There are many texts there, but using color and size, the person has been able to give you some level of direction to what you're going to read and giving importance to different elements in this design. Now, this is another design. Look at it. You're most likely going to start at the center because this gives you some level of importance. The boldness around this, the contrast, the color, the size, all of this help to give you importance for the different element in the design. Same thing here. You like it to look at the element that are bigger in size, that are made bolder, and the colors are brighter. Because before you think about smaller, paler colors on the design. So all of these things are used to establish hierarchy in a design. Now, let's talk about balance. Balance helps to provide visual stability to a design. It controls the visual gravity of the visual weight of the component in that design. Now, there are different types of balance. We have the symmetrical balance, the asymmetrical balance, and the radial balance. And with symmetrical balance, there's even distribution of the visual weight in the design. If you draw a straight line in the middle of the design, you'll find out that on both sides of that design, the elements are equally arranged, and it gives a very stable and orderly look to your design. Asymmetrical balance on the other side, there is some level of unequal proportion to the element, and this is not in a haphazard manner. It is intentional and thoughtful. It gives some sense of tension and sense of movement to your design, but it still allows you to see that balance and that stability in that design. So let's look at an example of symmetrical and asymmetrical balance. This one on the left is a symmetrical balance. The two elements on both sides of the center are exactly the same. They are equal in every proportion. Now look at this. This and these are not exactly the same. However, there's some level of order. This one terminates almost around the same place with this element. The same thing here. So even though they are not entirely the same, there is a sense of stability and order to the design. So that's an asymmetrical balance. The same thing here. This one has elements that are directly equal to each other across the center. But here, they're not directly equal, but you could draw a line through the center and it's going to be as sharp and as straight as possible. So even though they're not exactly identical or equal, there is still some level of balance for this one. Is another image. On both sides of the center, you have equal element, and this is a symmetrical balance. But here you have elements that are not entirely the same. However, they are arranged in a stable, orderly manner. So this is an asymmetrical balance. Now, apart from these two balances that we mentioned, we have a radial balance. The radial balance, the elements are arranged in a circular manner in which they rotate from a central point, just like the wheel of a bicycle. So this happens in a very orderly pattern and gives a sense of depth and a sense of movement to the design. So look at this particular image. You can see that from the center, all the elements are arranged in a very orderly manner and circular manner, and this gives order, a sense of movement to that particular design. So this is an example of a radial balance. You can use this balance too in your design. Hello, I believe you are enjoying this video. If you are, take a few seconds to click the subscribe button. Thank you. Now let's get back to the video. Now let's talk about contrast. When you have two or more components in your design having opposite visual impact, you can see contrast in this case. And contrast talks about how different the elements in a design are. When you have two elements placed close to each other in design, when you establish difference using a variety of elements or variety of principles or styles around it, you establish contrast. So that contrast is the degree of difference between the elements in that design. Look at this image. You have three sets of a pair, and there's a difference in the contrast. You can see that you're likely to find this one to be most contrasting. If you look afar, you're not likely to be able to differentiate these two elements because they look so much alike. The difference in that, even though their colors are different, the difference is not so observable. you need to be close by to see it. So the contrast is not good enough here. There isn't enough contrast. And compared to this one, you can look at this spear from afar and you can differentiate them because of the degree of contrast. So by differentiating contrast here, you can see that the ability to establish differences for these pairs is very different because of contrast. So you can use color to establish contrast. The more different the colors are, the more the contrast to those elements. Now you can use size to establish contrast. You have a small text here, you have a big and bold text here. By using big difference in the sizes, you've established a strong contrast between the two elements. Apart from contrast, let's talk about repetition. Repetition is about repeating the same element in your design, and things like shapes, colors, font, lines, texture can be repeated, and this gives a sense of memorability and familiarity to your design. And for brands and companies, it helps them carve a space for themselves. It gives a sense of identity that is recognized by their customers, their client base, or their target audience. Look at this design. You can see how the stripes are repeated in all the merchandise or all the design products. The colors, the gray, the white color, the stripes, all of these things are repeated. The font. So this gives a sense of memorability and makes the brand more recognizable in the minds of the audience, of the people. So when they see any particular product packaged like this, with this package design, they can always associate it with a particular brand. So repetition can help you do that. Now let's talk about proximity. Proximity talks about how close different objects are in a particular design. Now, objects that are close together, they tend to be related. So a way for you to express relationship in your design is to use proximity. It helps to create that sense of relationship and organization to your designs. It's you're basically communicating that certain parts of your design that are grouped together or placed close to each other are connected in a particular way. For example, let's check out this. Now, this is more like a card where you have different elements placed close to each other. Now, on the top left, you have Kenya Reed, web designer. This text speaks about the description of the owner of this card. Now, here you have what looks like the contact detail of the um, card owner, and on this right side you have the icons that describe what this person does. And by grouping them together, you've created a sense of proximity and organization to the design. So proximity does that for you. Let's talk about white space. White space is also called negative space, and that is the space that surrounds the element. That could be the internal space or the external space of that particular element. And white space helps you to scan a design text easily. It increases the readability and legibility. It gives a sense of aesthetics to the design and helps call attention to certain areas. The fact that it is a white space does not mean that it has to be white. It can be any color. So the white space is not to denote the color of the space, just to denote that is an empty space around that particular element. Look at this design. You have a text here and you have a white empty space out around the text and also within the letters, inside the letters. So all of these spaces that are not occupied by any element, they are called white space or negative spaces. Now you can use white space in very creative ways. You can see this particular one. It looks as if you have a letter N, but somehow the white space around has been used to create the illusion of a dog inside the letter. The same thing here. You have a vase, and then on both sides it looks as if you have the illusion of two faces, two people facing each other. So white space can be used in a creative way. Now, one brand that has used white space in a creative way is FedEx. If you look closely, you have an empty space around the letters, but look within the letter. Look at the internal white space between letters, and look at this. Between E and X, there is an illusion of an arrow in a direction, and this is very intentional in the design of this particular logo. That arrow there has a meaning, and what it does is that it communicates the speed and accuracy with which FedEx convey their services. It gives that idea of the that speed, that directness, and that communication is what has been implied in this particular design. So putting this white place, this is a very creative way of using your white space to communicate an idea to your audience. Now, let's talk about some relational elements. Now we have alignment. Alignment in design, it gives more attention to a part of your visual composition. And when you have shape, object, or text that are important, it's crucial that you align them in a particular way. And I believe we talked about alignment in the previous slides. You can left align, you can center align, you can align to the right, you can align to the top, to the bottom. There you can find that all those elements, they start from the same point. In this particular slide, you can see that all these elements are left aligned. They all start from the same point on the left side. If they start from the same point on the right side, that is more of a right alignment. But let's go to the next one. We talked about that more in the previous tutorial.